this presentation is really about how you can move towards what I talk brain integration. So I'm really big on Daniel Siegel. I don't know if you guys are familiar with his topic. It's called Interpersonal Neurobiology. And this is his most recent book called The Mindful Therapist. I actually like the book Mindsight better. That's going to go over some of the topics I'm going to talk about. But in terms of what we're going to talk to you about health and integration, taking things like sugar and how to reduce it, but not being rigid about it. So see, what happens is, I'm going to talk about this, Daniel Siegel talks about this river of brain integration. It's called the FAST, S-A-F, flow of river integration, and it stands for flexibility, adaptability, and stability. And it's this river, and on either river bank is rigidity or chaos. So you need to have this optimal amount of flexibility, adaptability, and stability in order to evenly go down this river and have good integration. So with these habits, oftentimes what happens is we're orienting either towards too much rigidity on one riverbank or too much chaos on the other riverbank. Dieting is like that. Sometimes what will happen is people will be very rigid for a while, and then what will happen is they'll rebel, and then they'll go towards chaos on the other side. So what we're aiming for is this integration. Okay, so first, before I go into the top 10 list, number 10 on the list is be willing to change what you eat. That's number 10. And this is, so first I want to go into background about the brain. I don't know, I'm not going to go too much into it, but I'm going to break it down a little bit. In your brain, you have more neurons up here. It's called the prefrontal cortex, and they have the executive functioning happens out up here. It's things like empathic listening, response flexibility, morality, intuition, fear modulation. So there are higher functions of the brain. So that's just the front. We'll call that the prefrontal cortex. The other part of the brain is the brain stem and the limbic system, which is the flight, fright, freeze mode. And that has to do with the stress response. So like when a car pulls out in front of us and we slam on the brakes, that's the limbic system going into play. And there's an automatic stress response. So I'm going to talk about our food choices and how it relates to what's going on in the brain. I just want to give that background because I'm going to refer back to it. And basically, unless we engage in activities that enhance the prefrontal cortex, where we practice the capacity to think about thinking and reframe our thoughts, we're going to end up being reactive. So we need to do more things to kind of grow and strengthen this part of our brain, or we're just going to go to what I'm going to call the superhighway. That's what Daniel Siegel calls this kind of limbic system automatic response. And it has to do with our eating habits in childhood, because the axons and the dendrites of the neurons in our brain are thicker and there are more of them from childhood. So it's a superhighway. Like we have this automatic stress response that we go down. And then the prefrontal cortex is, Daniel Siegel calls them new neural networks, or I call it like the dirt road. So if you want to make new changes in your life, new eating habits, practice having a response time where you're able to slow down and have a more reasoned response instead of being reactive, you have to kind of pave your road, and it takes a lot of time. So one of the reasons I'm going to talk about integration and having compassion with yourself is that it doesn't happen overnight that the dirt road becomes a highway. You have to have patience and practice to retrain your body and brain to get where you want to go. So there's like a biological, scientific component. It can happen. What Daniel Siegel has found is that neuroplasticity and neurogenesis is capable throughout the lifetime. So they say the brain stops developing at age 25, but the truth is you have the capacity to create new neural networks and repair your neural networks throughout your lifetime. That's what the neuroscience research has found. So what we need to do is find this middle ground, and the most important thing is practice. engaging and choosing in activities that get us where we want to go. Okay, so I think that was kind of my overview of the brain stuff. The reason you have to be willing to change what you eat, again, is that rigidity component. If you're not willing to change what you eat, if you're not willing to reduce your sugar intake, then you're not going to get where you want to go. And I think it's important to be honest with yourself about what you are willing to do and what you're not willing to do. And because I'm going to talk about it later on, there's this quote on number 4 on my list that says, affect-loaded experiences, which is emotion-laden experiences, they tend to store in memory more deeply. So if you're having a conflict about a choice, and you make one choice, but there's another part of you wants another direction, you're not having integration happen. So what I'm going to encourage in this talk is that you slow down and you're realistic about the change you want, and then you just take steps to get there, but in an integrated kind of turtle-like pace. Yeah. So one quote I like from Daniel Siegel, he says, "Our brain's memory is altered by each revisiting of an experience." This is really interesting. So every time you think a thought, even if you've had that same thought 100 times, you're reprogramming your brain. So every day and every thought is the opportunity to recreate your brain, to be more where you want it to be. So we have the capacity to change repetitive thoughts and any kind of compulsive behavior, including compulsive eating. Okay, so in terms of being willing to change what you eat, the reason why it's hard to change what we eat is because there's a lot of rigidity around eating. And I say there are 5 main things. One is habit, culture, advertising, which is a $60 billion a year industry, chemical aspects of food, which are very addictive, and stress. So these are the things that influence and kind of put up roadblocks towards us kind of paving our, and we have to be realistic about it. The one thing, I'm going to give you guys solutions to combat around these things. Like one of my top 10 lists is, number 8 is, when you purchase anything in a package, you want it to be 5 ingredients or less. And the ingredients are names that you can pronounce. So what we want to do is keep it simple, and you don't want any strange chemicals in your food. The problem is that oftentimes the chemicals have an addictive component to it. Like, I don't know if anyone's familiar with monosodium glutamate, MSG. It's a neurotoxin. It causes cell death on your tongue, and it's in a lot of foods. And there's some controversy around it because it occurs naturally as well. I mean, MSG occurs whenever a protein is taken from anything else. Like if you take the protein out of a tomato, then you created MSG. But you can actually purchase MSG. It's like these white crystals, and they'll put it on like Chinese food and stuff. And what it does is it causes you to be hungry. And like if you, like I say, purchase food in a package that's 5 ingredients or less. Triscuits is one example, but I always say get the original Triscuits, because if you get any of the flavored Triscuits, they have MSG on it. And what that is when you eat them, it'll make you want to keep eating more of them. And I found this years ago when I had more processed foods, is I was always hungry. Like I would eat, and then 30 minutes later I was hungry again. And I was just one of those people that was very sensitive to food, for better or for worse. So I didn't really have the choice to eat crappy because the way my body responded to it. Other people though, what some of you are going to have to do is practice paying attention to how you feel when you eat. Because for some of you, you might not be so aware, but if you sit with it for about 30 minutes, and one way you can test for food allergies, if you're not really sure and you don't want to go and pay money, is in the morning when you wake up, whatever it is you think you might be allergic to, just eat that one thing. So say you think you might have an allergy to peanuts, which peanuts and corn and dairy and wheat are probably the 4 most common. So like wake up in the morning and just have peanut butter. And then you'll know by about noon whether you're allergic to it. because you'll feel really bad. I mean, so that's one way to notice whether or not you have food allergies. Okay, so that was be willing to change what you eat. And then I'm going to keep coming back to this river of integration. And on the riverbank, there's rigidity. And on the other riverbank, there's chaos. And so what you're going to want to ask yourself is, do I need more stability in my life, or do I need more flexibility in my life in order to change what I eat? Because the fast flow down the river of integration is flexibility, adaptability, and stability. So, and that's what you want to ask yourself to keep yourself from falling on the riverbanks of rigidity or chaos around eating.